Her resolve to confront him crumbled instantly. She put on her brave face, plashing the fake smile back onto her lips. Of course I am not mad. You are my husband, and I love you. Van let out a massive sigh of relief, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. I could not decide what to wear. I have never been examined by a gynecologist before. It is a lot of pressure. He looked over at Reba, giving her a firm, confident nod. Montgomery wished me luck. Thank you. With that, he grabbed a protein bar from the counter and bounded up the stairs to shower. Reba stood in the hallway, watching him go, her mind reeling from the sheer absurdity of her life. She walked into the kitchen and began to aggressively scrub a spot on the counter that was already perfectly clean. The wall phone rang again. Reba snatched it off the receiver. Her voice clipped. Hello. Where's Ross? She listened for a moment as Brock made his excuses on the other end of the line. Well, he seemed a little tense, so I dropped him off at the driving range after dinner. Brock explained over the phone. Dinner? Reba demanded. What dinner did you feed him? Before Brock could answer, she heard her other son yelling happily in the background. I had a banana split, a candy bar, and a nice mocha coffee. Can I stay up all night? Reba squeezed her eyes shut. Please thank Brock for bringing him home late, she muttered bitterly into the phone. And all jacked up on processed sugar. She listened to Brock attempt to apologize, but she was in no mood for his excuses. I know what is really bothering you, Brock, and I just want to assure you that Jake was out of the room with you while I was being looked at by the doctor I will call later. She slammed the phone down onto the receiver with a loud clatter. Oh, you got to be kidding me. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, her maternal determination solidifying into a hard resolve. If Cheyenne was not going to fix the situation in that bedroom, Reba was going to do it for her. She marched out of the kitchen and up the carpeted stairs. She opened the door to the master bedroom without knocking. The room was still an aesthetic nightmare, but Van was nowhere to be seen. Cheyenne was sitting on the edge of the bed, quietly folding a pile of Vanna's brightly colored athletic shirts. Cheyenne, I thought you were going to tell him to get that machine out of your room. And all this other garbage, Reba said, keeping her voice low but firm. Cheyenne looked up, her expression a mix of guilt and defiance. I was going to, Mother, but then I realized it does not really bother me that much. Van needs his space, and I did not want to make a big deal about it. Well, I do, Reba said, stepping fully into the room and crossing her arms. Mother? Mother, stop. Cheyenne pleaded in a frantic whisper, her eyes darting toward the bathroom door. At that moment, Van emerged from the bathroom, freshly showered and wearing a clean T-shirt. He was completely in his own world, facing his cherished cheerleader poster and chanting softly to himself. Go, Van. Come on. Yes. Come on. Go, Van. Go. He turned around and noticed Reba standing in the room. He dropped his fists, offering a cheerful smile. Hey, Mrs. Hart. Reba did not return the smile. She pointed a rigid finger at the poster, the neon comforter, and the general state of the room. You cannot keep this thing in here. Van looked confused, turning his head to look at the poster. It is okay. Cheyenne said it was cool. He looked over at his wife, expecting her to back him up. Tell her, Cheyenne. Cheyenne froze, looking like a trapped animal. Tell me what? Van asked, his smile faltering as he noticed the tension in the room. Tell him you do not want this thing in here. Reba urged her daughter, stepping back to let Cheyenne take the lead. What? Mother, not now, Cheyenne hissed, her face burning with a mixture of anger and humiliation. He has been living out of trash bags for a week. I do not mind. But she does, Reba insisted, looking directly at Van. Van stood completely still, his eyes darting back and forth between the two women. The cheerful innocence drained from his face, replaced by a look of deep, genuine hurt. What? You do not like my trash bag system? Cheyenne closed her eyes, letting out a long, shuddering breath. The pressure of the day, the pregnancy hormones. and the sheer ugliness of the room finally broke her resolve. She snapped, "Look, it is not really a system, Van," Cheyenne cried, her voice trembling with emotion. "It is more like a big, disgusting mess." Van took a step back, as if she had physically struck him. "Big, disgusting mess," he repeated, his voice cracking slightly. "Is that your fancy way of saying you do not like it?" "Yes," Cheyenne admitted, tears finally spilling over her eyelashes and tracking down her cheeks. Van threw his hands up in the air, a gesture of complete surrender and profound betrayal. "I cannot believe this. What is next? You are going to tell me you do not like the cheerleaders." Cheyenne crossed her arms over her chest, sobbing quietly. "Oh, man, this is a nightmare," Van groaned, pacing the small space left between the bed and the door. "It is like I do not even know you. How could you possibly think that I would want to wake up every single day and see that in my room?" He stopped pacing and looked at Cheyenne, his heart breaking in real time. "I am sorry. I thought it was our room." He reached out and grabbed his heavy athletic jacket from the back of a chair. He looked at the cheerleader poster one last time. "Come on, girls," he muttered bitterly. "We are out of here." He turned on his heel and stormed out of the room, his heavy footsteps thudding down the hallway and down the stairs. A moment later, the front door slammed shut, shaking the walls of the house. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the bedroom. Cheyenne wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and slowly turned to face her mother. Her sadness instantly morphed into a fierce, blinding anger. "Thanks a lot, Mother," Cheyenne spat, her voice dripping with venom. "Now, Cheyenne," Reba said, trying to maintain a calm, reasonable tone. "It was going to happen sooner or later. You cannot live like this, bottling everything up." "Oh, and screaming at each other is so much better," Cheyenne yelled, her voice echoing in the quiet house. "Just because you are married, you should not be afraid to say what is on your mind," Reba argued, standing her ground. "I do not know why you were not honest with him in the first place." Cheyenne glared at her mother, her chest heaving as she searched for the most hurtful words she could find. "Well, maybe because I did not want to drive him away like you drove away, Dad." The words hit Reba with the force of a physical blow. The air left her lungs, and she stood perfectly still, the color draining entirely from her face. The silence that followed was deafening. Cheyenne saw the immediate, devastating impact of her words. Her anger evaporated, replaced by a crushing wave of guilt. "Whoa! Whoa, get back here," she said quickly as Reba took a step toward the door. "Look, Mother, I am sorry, okay? Just forget about it." Reba stopped, her posture rigid, her voice terrifyingly calm and quiet. "No, I am not just going to forget about it. Do you actually think I am the reason your father left this family?" Cheyenne looked away, unable to meet her mother's eyes. But she was too defensive to back down completely. "Well, is it not obvious? You pretty much control everything that happens around here." Reba felt a cold knot form in her stomach. She swallowed hard against the lump in her throat. "I would rather not take credit for this current disaster. You know what?" Cheyenne continued, pacing the room in agitation. "If something is not exactly the way that you think it should be, you just have to say something and fix it. Why cannot you just leave things alone? I mean, do you really think Dad would care what kind of comforter is on the bed?" Reba looked at the hideous orange and black fabric, then back at her heartbroken, angry daughter. Her own heart ached with profound, quiet grief that she rarely let anyone see. "No," Reba whispered, her voice devoid of all emotion. "It is obvious your father is not picky about what is on his bed." Without another word, Reba turned and walked out of the room. She walked down the hallway, her spine straight, leaving Cheyenne alone in the neon glow of her ruined sanctuary. The next afternoon, Reba found herself sitting in the waiting room of a clinical, softly lit office. The beige walls and the gentle sound of a tabletop water fountain were designed to be soothing, but Reba felt anything but relaxed. She sat stiffly in a comfortable armchair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, mentally replaying the fight with Cheyenne over and over again. A door opened, and a kind-faced woman with warm eyes ushered her inside the inner office. "Oh, Reba,